Yes, my name is Selim Kuru, as it's on board as well, on the slide. And I'm an associate professor at the University of Washington, and my research is, as a matter of fact, on 13th to 16th centuries Anatolian Turkish literature. Not only Ottoman, but pre-Ottoman Anatolia is within my focus, within my lens, in a sense. The signatures of sultans in the title of my talk were called Tura or Nishan. There were two more names, in fact, sometimes even hot. Signs of Love in the title is a reference to Ottoman, Signs of Love, yes, is a reference to Ottoman lyric poetry. The image on the slide here is a meshk. It's called a meshk. That's a practice sheet of a calligrapher, which is later treated as a piece of art, because it was kind of ornamented later, but you can see how sloppy at times the lettering. But this was a common way of practicing particular letters in particular calligraphic genres. So this is a more Nesih-like inscriptional style of writing that is put on and on by one pen. The person is exercising certain combinations of Arabic letters, but also these are Arabic letters, Arabic alphabet letters, in fact, but they have a distinct flavor they gained in Anatolia in the pens of Turkish writing scribes, who were also writing in Arabic and Persian, as a matter of fact. And this meshk apparently were very popular pieces once the exercise ended. People kept them in albums. Now they are put into frames, and they appear in auctions abroad, etc. Even though they were basically, doodling in a sense, exercise these sheets. As I said, like Arabic script started representing Turkic languages around 10th, 11th centuries after Turks became Muslim. Turkish language shifted from Uyghur script in Asia, not in Anatolia, into Arabic script. I say Anatolian Turkish, this covers Ottoman Turkish, but it's conventionally called Ottoman Turkish as well. In fact, this name, Ottoman Turkish, is a very modern name that starts naming the language in 19th century. Before that, it was Lisan-ı Türki, like Turkish language, or Lisan-ı Rum, Lisan-ı Şuara-i Rum, Lisan-ı Udebai Rum, etc. Rum is a name for Anatolia, which would, for some strange reason, after 18th century, started signifying Greek populations of Anatolia, not of Greece. So Rum, Istanbul Rumları now is very strictly pointing to people instead of the land. But it used to be in Arab geographers' works, etc. Rum was Asia, what was called Asia Minor, what we call Anadolu, Anatolia today. But in 18th century there was this shift. In fact, before 18th century, Rum also signified Greeks, but nobody studied that detailedly, tracing the adventures of this one word, signifying both a land, Anatolia, in fact, land of the Greeks. It was because of Byzantine Empire taught, so it signified the people as well. But after changing hands, the land has into Turks. The name of the land continued to be Rum until late 18th century. Anatolia is a very modern, old word again. Toponyms, like place names, are very difficult to trace words in history, because people call the same place with different names and they merge into each other, they change, Okay, the way these practice sheets of letters of the alphabet turn into art is telling about Ottoman art, about its focus on impression, its tendency towards abstraction, and its different economy. Not much figurative paintings are there in Ottoman art, but calligraphy was as important, if not more, as an artistic medium as you can see on the faces of buildings, all these inscriptions in Istanbul and all the cities, as a matter of fact, that Ottomans ruled over from Balkans to Egypt. As a scholar of language and literature, I will leave the art history to art historians. Wow, okay. And I won't talk about the innovative recreation and execution of Arabic script, Arabic alphabet, Arabic letters in the Ottoman chancellery offices and its artistic development. There are many books on, and articles on the topic of Ottoman calligraphy, and I'm not an expert on that. Instead, I would like to give you a brief history of the development of written Turkish in Anatolia, starting from the late 13th century, and present you with a late 15th century poem in English to conclude, both in English and its original. I am hoping to have a lively conversation after my presentation, but you can also interrupt me if you see something curious. What is this all that? I am okay with that, okay? I will lose my track, but get back somewhere else, most probably, that it works. The Ottoman Sultan's signature is very unique. In fact, matchless, I argue, compared to other rulers' ways of signing documents, because these signatures, all this thing, are really exaggerated on the face of a document. The document starts here, and it is generally a huge, long paper roll being rolled to be delivered. And when you undo the roll, you first see the tura as a very exaggerated sign, and then by mid-16th century, turas became really exaggerated, like ornate, and they overdid it for some reason. And when you read such documents that come with such a beautiful symbol, it is a bit disappointing because it ends up being either a land deed or an assignment document, like, okay, this guy will be the judge of this little village kind of a thing. But sometimes I am not aware of a work on which turas were this ornate, which documents had this ornate turas, like signatures, than more simpler ones like this one. This is the same tura. In fact, one is a very matter-of-factly executed one. In fact, it is not that easy to do it. But the other one is definitely an artistic creation, like with all the gilded empty spaces, the blue, really dark blue lapis lazuli colored ink, and golden leaves, etc. An art historian would have given you the real story. I can. This sign may be related to the Mongolian tangas. 12th, 13th centuries, we see Mongolian tangas, square-shaped stamps. So tanga, Mongolians used some square-shaped Chinese, under its Chinese influence, forms probably tangas that fit all the name of the ruler inside a square shape, but it is nothing like this shape, which is, some scholars claim, this is in fact not only some writing put together, but it also signifies some arrows and a bow, which was a very important, fighting tool, let's say, weapon. So it symbolizes in this way some sort of authority, some sort of power. As a matter of fact, the documents which carried this signature, the signature stood as a guarantee for the person who has the document with the tura inscribed. It was the guarantee of the document, and there were forgeries of turas, which shows that it's so important. People tried to claim a land for themselves by imitating turas, etc. Some Turkish scholars worked on those forged documents and forged turas as well. Starting in the late 14th century onward, all documents issued from Sultan's office carried this tura. In fact, this was a separate office in the Ottoman state bureaucracy. The office of the tura maker, Nishancı, is the title. However, the stylization of the sign took place in the second half of the 15th century and developed into this very well set form later. Here these lines from one of the best poets from Anatolia or Rum, as I mentioned, as it was called then, 500 years ago. The poet Necati was the nishancı of an Ottoman prince in the Anatolian town Amasya when he composed this praise poem. And as I mentioned, a nishancı was the officer who was responsible for executing the Sultan's tura on documents. So when you think about like tens of documents issued from the palace for land deeds, all these kind of daily activities, assignments of scholars, assignments of judges, etc. Somebody needed to do this sign over and over again for the Sultan of the period. This poem, one of the very, this poem goes this way. I will read only 2 couplets from this very long praise poem with the repeating word nishan at the end of each verse. Zahir yüzünde ahsene-i eşkale ma sadak, mana yüzünde çar-ı melaik siper nişan. This is Turkish of 16th century and like late 15th century, and it makes no sense for those who haven't studied Ottoman Turkish. And even for some of us who have studied Ottoman Turkish, that may not make sense because it's a very difficult historical language. And I read documents with a dictionary on my lap. After all these years of working on Ottoman texts, I can trust my knowledge to interpret or name them. So in this couplet, zahir yüzünde ahsene-i eşkale ma sadak, mana yüzünde çar-ı melaik siper nişan, Necati is simply saying its vision is a confirmation of the beauties of existence. So the plant images and all this beauty is a sign of the beauties of existence. And the Tura is a shield, like a sphere for angels. So the poet resembles this shape, this part of the Tura, both to a shield to protect the carrier of the document, and to the celestial spheres where angels reside. So this is the beautification of this sign. In the same poem, the poet stresses the power of this signature as well. Zahir budur ki dosta ve düşmana yarar. Çün göstere alameti ti'u siper nişan. Clearly the Tura is good for friends and against enemies, as it shows the signs of both the arrows and the shield. So instead of a bow, it is the shield and arrows. It protects the friends of the Tura, the carriers of the document, and it protects him against the enemies. So the Tura is represented here as a collection of arrows and a shield, and arrows, as I mentioned, would be effective on enemies, and the shield would protect the friends of the Sultan. The shape of the Tura conceals a couple of terms and ornamental elements. The phrase in the case of this particular Tura, the signature, represents Süleyman the Magnificent, who reigned in the 16th century. In a magnificent manner, it reads as follows. In fact, this is the formula for each Sultan. Only the names of the Sultan and his father changes in this formula, and then if the phrase remains the same. Süleyman Han bin Şah Selim Han el Muzaffer Daima. The Tura is considered to have 4 elements in it. This is Süleyman's Tura in its simplest form, and there are the stages of writing it. First, the name Süleyman is inscribed in this bottom part of the Tura, which is called Sere. So the Sere of a Tura is this bottom part which hosts the name of the Sultan and his father. And then Sultan's name is followed by Shah, and then Bin, the son of, and then Selim, father's name. Süleyman's father was Selim, my namesake. And then he is a Shah as well. In fact, this person sees 2 Shahs here. I'm not sure about that. And then Han, the title, one of the titles of Ottoman Sultans. They were Hans. sultans and shahs and padishahs. And El Muzaffer Daiman, the phrase which means victorious forever, complements gives the quality of the sultan. So I said this bottom part would be called sere, and this shield part, which goes this way, was called beyze, and the arrows would be the banners too. So they're not only arrows, but also the banners of a sultan's army coming. Two, it was called. And then there is this little sign coming inside the beyze. It is called a dagger, hançer. These are the Turkish terms, but two means banner. Sere is a Turkic word, but it is not exactly identifiable for a meaning, but it's kind of putting down to spread at the below kind of a thing. But then the name will be the base for this symbol, and the letterings in elif, letters, etc. would make the two, the banners, and the nuns, the letter ne in Arabic alphabet generally would make the beyze, and the shape would be this interesting shape. Even in the names of these parts, the dagger and banners, there's an implication of the Tura's threatening power. This shape gained an iconic character, and in my opinion reached a classical form as represented by the Tura of Abdülhamid II in the late 19th century. What you see here is the sere, the bottom part, turns into a rounded shape, and the names get longer as well. Abdülhamid has more letters than Süleyman, okay? So they needed more space in the sere for some sultans. But this, in fact, this transformations appears in Mahmud II's Tura first, this rounded sere kind of a thing, and then this pyramidal thing, like this is really amazingly executed. And several calligraphers worked on sultans' turas in a competitive fashion as well. The best book on the topic is still a bit dated from 1970s, Süha Umur's Osmanlı Padişah Turaları. It's now like an antique book, which is very difficult to find. The formulaic phrase in the turas, as in the example Süleyman Han bin Şah, Selim Han, El Muzaffer Daiman, reflects the power of the Arabic and Persian languages on Turkish that developed in Anatolia as a written language. Because in this phrase, there's only Han, which is Turkic or Mongolian, as a matter of fact, word, and the rest, El Muzaffer Daiman, is an Arabic phrase. Shah is from Persian. The names are Arabic, Süleyman and Selim, the sultan's names generally were Arabic origin, unlike Selçukid rulers whose names were Persian, like Kayhusrev, Kaytalbot, etc. This is an interesting change. Let's move from the sultan's signature to the language it represented and which has appeared in history centuries before this originally Turkish arrangement of a powerful signature, because these signatures we see earliest in documents signed by Orhan, which may be later copies, which is like 14th century, but Turkish started 15th century, no, 14th century, late 14th century. But Turkish in Anatolia started much before as a spoken language, at least in Anatolia, before the Tura. The earliest traces of Turkic languages, that is, the Turkish language family, are from the late 16th century in northeastern Asian steppes. And these documents are mostly religious texts and in different alphabets used for Turkish, from Chinese script to Uyghur script, from Sogdian script. Like there are a flurry of scripts that represented Turkish before the Islamization of Turkic tribes. And these are mostly Buddhist and Christian, early Christian texts produced in Turkish in Asia, as I mentioned, until the Islamization of the Turkic communities and the appearance of the first Islamic Turkish texts in the 10th, 11th centuries. All these, like there are tales and documents found in some caves in various languages, among which Turkish is very dominant, of Buddhist scriptures especially. This is a long and fascinating history, I mean the pre-Islamic Turkish, but our topic today is Anatolian Turkish, a latecomer into the realm of written languages. In Anatolia, the earliest samples of Turkish language are found in Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi's Macaronic mixed verses. He composed some verses which combine Armenian, Turkish, Greek, Arabic and Persian in one couplet, for example, and which reflected Anatolia's linguistic diversity in 13th century, let's say. In this century, Anatolia was kind of the wild west of the old world, like everybody was going to Anatolia for some reason. Turks had entered Anatolia in 1071 and had established the Selçukid Empire of Rum, which is Anatolia. However, what changed the destiny of this land was a world-changing event in itself. Several communities that were escaping the Mongolian raids coming from the borders of the China into the Europe from north and towards Anatolia, following this Silk Road, Mongolian raids. These people escaping those raids flooded Anatolia with their unique cultures and languages and mixed with locals. So after 1071, 200 years approximately later, another wave of Turkic migrations to Anatolia happened. Also Persian and Arabic people migrated, but apparently it was predominantly Turkic tribes. Turkish appeared in this land by the end of the 13th century suddenly in the form of translations from Arabic and Persian. Surprisingly, the earliest texts were generally literary productions, mostly verse narratives, long poems about philosophical topics, Islamic principles. All these kind of information was very popular. Apparently people were teaching the locals Islam, but also providing them with textbooks in verse, in a sense. While these late narrative poems revealed the educational backgrounds of their writers by the Persian and Arabic learned vocabulary employed in them, they also preserved a wealth of Turkish vocabulary, signifying the power of Turkish as a spoken language by that time in Anatolia. Otherwise, the first authors of Turkish had definitely had an education in Arabic and Persian, or Persian, the Latin and Greek of medieval Islamic cultures, Persian and Arabic. At the beginning of the 14th century, in 1300s, the fall of first the Selçuk Empire and then the Mongolian Ilkhanid Empire, which was around this region, and Selçuks of Rums were commanding over the Black Sea and Mediterranean ports of the Middle Anatolia. There was the Byzantine Trebizond Empire of Trebizond and Byzantium in Istanbul at that time. This is 14th century. But Selçuks were kind of controlling the Mediterranean Black Sea trade at that time. The Selçuk Turks never used Turkish for their state affairs or education. State affairs would be conducted in Persian, and education was in Arabic, the language of the Quran. Turkish appeared by the end of 13th century, as I said before. The 14th century is a very important century, proved to be an important century because it witnessed the fall of the Selçuk Empire, and then the Mongolian Ilkhans opened up space for the Turkic lords of Anatolia and looked for approximately a century like the contemporary Italian city-states. Really in Europe as well there was a fracturing of land being experienced at that time. People work on this 13th, 14th centuries and the falling apart of the world after the Mongolian invasions. The impact of Mongolian invasions was very big on not only Asia but also Europe and European governments. But Anatolia was full of small kingdoms, I will call them, but they were in fact very much like Italian city-states. There would be a central city somewhere, Like for Ottomans, it was Bursa after Nicaea, like Iznik. And they would have a courtly life in these cities. The sultan, like a ruler, would be there with poets and viziers, etc., smaller courts that they most probably emulated after experience with intercommunication with Seljuks, Seljuk kings. Yes, the difference in these small city-states was that they conducted their state affairs in Turkish. People explain this phenomena by saying that the rulers didn't know Persian or Arabic. They were raiders, in fact. They were warlords, in a sense. So this caused the transformation, but it is still a difficult to explain phenomena, suddenly Turkish gaining such important ground. These state evolved into dynastic bureaucracies, and the most successful among them proved to be the Ottoman state, emirate, sometimes they are called, which was found in the northwestern region of Anatolia, bordering with the Byzantium, Eastern Roman Empire. But I don't think anyone could have imagined at this point in the early 14th, late 13th century that it was the making of a world empire they were witnessing. An empire that would also be one of the longest lasting and would give way to the modern world we live in today. Ottoman Empire by 17th century was ruling over Balkans, what is called Balkans today, and ruling over major trade routes, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and Mediterranean. Most of Mediterranean port cities were under their command or threat, Ottoman threat. And they were ruling Black Sea trade, which was very important because these were the port towns where the goods that come in through Silk Road would be delivered to Europe. So Ottomans by 16th century had a very good plan in their expansion where to rule over, kind of major trade routes. The Ottomans were victorious in their conquest of the world in this way by ruling over the world's main arteries of trade. In the 16th century, yet they weren't aware of the opening of new trade routes. They knew and were competitors in the Indian Ocean trade against the Portuguese, but they were disadvantaged in the race for the Atlantic and the world changing around them. New horizons were opening, but they were really separated from the Atlantic Sea and didn't have much access to this race. So this is largest borders of Ottoman Empire. As you can see, many Middle Eastern countries were established in the former Ottoman lands, and many crises, those former Ottoman lands in the Balkans that was experienced during 90s. Now we are experiencing terrible events in Egypt and other Middle Eastern countries, Iraq, Syria, etc. The story of empire to nation from Ottoman monarchy to Turkish Republic is a complex one and has been told throughout the 20th century several times. The Sultans are long gone, and the culture that is signified by the Tura, their signatures, was secluded into memory. You can see their signatures on the walls of the mosques, fountains, tombs. They have commissioned in a wide geography from the Balkans to Egypt. Less visible are thousands of poems written in their name that are preserved in manuscript collections. Unlike the visible signs on public monuments, these poems are invisible to general public, yet similar to the public inscriptions, they speak only to a limited number of scholars and researchers today. If we get back to our story of Turkish language, we need to understand that this is a language that experienced at least 3 major transformations along with the trials and turbulences of the Ottoman state. 3 transformations that are very different from each other. First, in the late 15th century, after the establishment of a stable centralized state under Ottoman dynastic rule, Anatolian Turkish developed into a full-fledged literary language. Second, in the late 18th century, with the modernization efforts and centralization of bureaucratic education and training, bureaucratic training and education, there was a transformation of writing style with the creation of a sort of a shorthand, the Rik-A script. This was a visual transformation of 19th century. And finally, in 1928, under the early Republic, a drastic change of skin for Anatolian Turkish happened. The transition from the Arabic-based Ottoman Turkish alphabet into the Latin-based modern Turkish alphabet. The last transformation brought along a great amnesia as Arabic and Persian teaching in the modern Turkish Republic was abolished in the schools, or rather sequestered into the university education, into the departments of Turkish language and literature and the theology departments or universities. And loanwords from these languages are at times forcefully dropped. Now I gave you a fast and furious history of Ottoman state and language, developed under the protection, control and encouragement of that state. But what was the Anatolian Turkish that was developed under the Ottoman Sultans at the end of the 16th century? One of the great Turkish writers, a bureaucrat, a historian, a storyteller, and a prolific poet, Mustafa Ali, who died in 1600, end of 16th century, described the language as follows, and I want attention of Turkish speakers especially, because this is Turkish. Vilayet-i Rum'da cari olan lisan-ı bül-acep, lisan-ı çağrdan mürekkep bir nutkı, pak-ı müzebbeptür ki, ehli diller tekellümünde güya ki sairinden azeptir. Faraza lisan-ı Arabi tekellümü Fars veya vacip olsa ve zeban-ı Farisi istimali sünnet-i seniyye makamında kıyam bulsa, beyan olunan halavetten mürekkep lisan-ı Türki telaffuzu müstahap ve basitinin Türki fusaha kavlince nehi vaciptir. Okay, I'm asking Turk how would you summarize this kind of a thing? It is very difficult to understand for us today. It shows the drastic change Turkish experience in 400 years. But is there a question? No? Everybody is mum? Okay. This is the translation by Cornel Fleischer, who wrote a wonderful biography of this poet and scholar. You can find his work in Turkish as well. It's originally in English. And it's called A Bureaucrat and a Gentleman in the Ottoman Empire, Mustafa Ali. It's a really fascinating read by Cornel Fleischer of Chicago University of Chicago professor. I changed this translation a bit and add a bracketed phrase to explain what are four languages. The astonishing language current in the state of Rum, this is Anatolian, composed of four languages. And in Ali's mind there was Anatolian Turkish, Chagatai, which is Eastern Turkic, used by Timur and his followers, Arabic and Persian. This astonishing language is a pure gilded tongue which in the speech of the literati seems more difficult than any of these others. If one were to equate speaking Arabic with a religious obligation and the use of Persian with a sanctioned tradition, then the speaking of Turkish made up of these sweetnesses becomes a meritorious act. And in the view of those eloquent in Turkish, the use of simple Turkish should be banished. Okay, so he in fact makes a play and he uses the religious concepts of Fars, Sünnet and Müstehab in ordering three languages. So Arabic is a Fars, it has to be spoken because it's the language of Quran. And Persian is a Sünnet because it's so powerfully impactful on literary heritage, literary influences on Ottoman. And then he says, since Turkish uses both these languages in its pot, it becomes the sweetest because it has the sweetnesses of all these two languages. Okay, Ali wrote that in late 16th century. There was at least two Turkishes as Ali mentions here, experienced in Anatolia. One, a high culture language, what today we call Ottoman Turkish. And another one that Ali calls basit, simple Turkish. Mustafa Ali warns those eloquent people to avoid the simple tongue and mix Arabic and Persian in a pot of Turkish for extra sweetness. This latter Turkish was difficult because it reflected a good knowledge of Quranic language Arabic and literary language Persian. Arabic established the foundations of theological and scientific education in the Ottoman Empire, and Persian literary works, it was used, and Persian literary works has become models for the Ottoman elite to write poetry and prose and to develop an imperial language. But then who were the people who produced amazing works in this crafty written language? Because Ottoman Turkish required a knowledge of Arabic and Persian. For that reason, it is very difficult to learn Ottoman Turkish for today's Turkish speakers. Even though it is Turkish in structure, its vocabulary and some phrase rules come from Arabic, either Arabic or Persian. So you need to learn these basic morphological rules of Arabic and Persian in order to delve into a good education in Ottoman Turkish. So I identify, simplified, in fact, three groups that produced abundant works in this crafty language. Ulema, the science, like the learned man. Kutta, the bureaucrats, the scribes. And then courtiers. First of all, immediately after the conquest of Istanbul in 1453, the Ottoman bureaucracy and education system experienced a huge transformation in the 15th century. New codes were written to organize the court life, the bureaucracy, and the university system. Ottoman madrasas were just like their European counterparts, religious schools where theological sciences shaped around research on the Quran. The Ottoman bureaucratic machine, on the other hand, involved intriguing recording system for tax collecting purposes, payment of salaries, imperial constructions, military campaign budgets, assignments of judges, professors, governors, etc. Every edict issued from the palace would be kept in a special register. In short, any business a modern state is involved today was conducted and recorded by the Ottoman state. It was an empire of writing that was crowned by the Sultan's signature, the Turan. In the Ottoman Empire, the palace of the Sultan and the palaces of princes had their own people. These were large communities made up of thousands of young servants. However, these servants were not slaves with the connotations of the word in English. They were highly educated people, and the palace school, the Enderun as it was named, was a sort of academy where various topics from music to sciences were taught. Madrasas, the Ottoman universities, were truly centralized by the mid-16th century, and professors would be assigned by the court, by the Sultan. Finally, the chancery, the bureaucratic heart of the empire, trained its own servants in a master-apprentice relationship. Here in this image from 1623, early 17th century, we see the process of production of a book. In fact, this is from a book painting. And the book is called Fetihname-i Seferi Eğri. What you see here is a scribe copying the drafts from the drafts of the author, a verse. You can see it's a poem, long poem, about a campaign, Ottoman campaign. And big book painter painting the drawings. In fact, you can find a matching drawing of what is represented in this picture in the book itself. And then the author is working on his draft at the top position with a larger turban and a larger representation. So it represents the making of the book, and this is found in the book itself, in a sense. But there are definitely authors. This was the palace chronicler Talikizade. He was named. And this book is an important work of art. And also the working conditions seem a bit too comfortable, I guess. I don't know. But this is not the easy way of writing, but apparently people wrote on their knees rather than on the rahlis, the desks. Until now, I identified two major uses of Anatolian Turkish language under the Ottomans, ruling and learning. This division of two spaces for writing is true for any state that depends on writing documents and books. The first kept the institutional memory, the second products of intellectuals that shared similar linguistic skills. In this case, most of the authors in Ottoman Empire were trilingual. They knew Persian, Arabic, and Ottoman, to some degree at least. By incorporating education and especially military and judiciary branches, the Ottoman state became a strong monarchy and produced a literary high language through its offices. The language that was used in each branch of the state machine relied on particular compositional schemes. Just to give you an example, a small example, how to address whom, for example, was a very important field of learning. Writing to rulers, to viziers, to judges, what phrases you are going to use. I choose an address from a document sent to Queen Elizabeth by Murat III at the last part of 16th century. And it goes, İftiharul muhadderatul İseviyye, muhtarul muvakkarat fil milletül mesihiyye, muslihil mesalihil taifetil nasraniyye, sahibetü edyaril haşmet vel vekar, vilayeti İngiltere kraliçesi, Elizabeth kraliçe hükümet akibetuha bil hayr. So the pride of the Christian woman, the elected by all reverenced among the nations of Jesus, righteous among the peaceful peoples of Nazareth, the owner of glorious and proud churches, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth. May God end her days in good. Since she's a Christian, she still has a chance to convert to Islam and die in peace. So they are praying for that fact, in fact, in this phrase. But it is also important that he uses the person who organized this phrase. It is a, compositional wonder because it rhymes, as you heard, and like it goes tam ta tam tam ta ta tam tam ta tam tam tam ta tam tam kind of a thing. And he uses Christian, Jesus in Nazareth, the place where Jesus was born, Jesus' name, and the people, his community, the churches he adds. Some people read Edyar is what was the other word I forgot, which means skirts. It's the there's a controversy in the scholarship. Is it the skirts that are glorious or the churches? I choose the churches interpretation. The science of addressing people of different rank and stature was shaped within the larger Islamic state organization. However, these would be developed further by the Ottoman state, reflecting the hierarchy in the state bureaucracy as well. In order to give you a brief glance of how things work in the Chancery, I would like to present two documents here. Okay, this one is something I really like. This is a petition to the palace dated 1737, and it is by an elephant handler. A guy who takes care of an elephant, apparently sent to the Ottoman Empire by the Nadir Shah, the ruler of Safavid Empire. And the guy came with the elephant to Constantinople, like Istanbul, and then at one point they forgot about it. So the guy don't have any means to support the elephant and himself. So he wrote this section of this document. Whatever follows this direction, counterclock direction, is how this petition was processed through different offices. So they took him seriously. It looks because there are lots of calculations in siyakat script, which is the most difficult style of writing in Ottoman Turkish. It was difficult intentionally because it was used to keep budgets and state, financial administration. So it was kind of coded. They didn't want everyone to be able to read this part. So I can't read it, for example, because it takes a different training to read this part of the document. This is a style which is used by the higher officers to dispatch a document that came to them to a lower officer. So this says like, dear teskireci, dear the document writer, please check what is going on in this document. And the guy is saying that I and my elephant haven't been receiving our monthly allowance, which was established as such, for several months. We are hungry, we are cold, please feed us, and etc. So the document goes to the state financial office. Somebody makes very detailed calculations about this monthly allowance, which was claimed by the petitioner, the elephant handler. His name was Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, so very Persian name. And then these calculations were sent to be checked to another office. I can't identify it by this brief note. But then there are further calculations in a different branch of financial administration. It goes all the way, and there is red warning sign about a mistake which was done during the travel of the document and between the offices. And then there is this derkenar, a copy from an old book, old guide of finances that proves that this calculation is correct, in fact. So it went around, and the guy was waiting with the elephant. I don't know if he ended up eat the elephant or a part of it, but I mean, we don't know anything more about this poor guy except for this document. But it is important, I think, these kind of documents are in thousands in the archive, okay? And it is important, I think, because it reflects how many branches on the main Office of Finance, correspondences, Divan-ı Kitabe, Divan-ı Maliye, etc. Different branches, and how seriously these petitions from people were taken. Because most probably Muhammad Ali didn't write this section. It was just like the older Arzu Halci in Istanbul streets in Sultanahmet with their typewriters. They used to sit when I was a student. I was still seeing them. Computers were not there then. So you would go to them and tell them about your trouble, and they would know the composition in their mind, how to express that trouble. So the same thing was going on from 16th century on. And they were taken seriously. I skipped a slide. In fact, I want to go back a bit. Sorry, I'm testing your patience by now. But these numbers are very important because there are more than 150 million documents in the Ottoman archives today. This is an amazing number. And books, only Süleymaniye Library, which is a conglomerate of older library collections today in Istanbul, only Süleymaniye has 70,000 volumes of manuscripts. And a volume may include more than one work, just like in European manuscript tradition. These are mind-blowing examples. And this is an important interesting document as well. This is in fact a registry book. It is a registry book, I don't want to make a mistake here, from the hand of Mimar Sinan. He kept this book himself. He was working on a bathhouse in Kanlıca. Unfortunately, apparently it is not existing today. Or is it? I am not sure. It is not. Nina Ergin, Bavar's professor, one of professors, at Koç University shared this with me, and I'm sharing it without her permission, but I'm sure she didn't say anything because we need to share our knowledge. Okay, but it is fascinating that Sinan would put each amount of mortar, for example, that he purchased, and then each amount of stone, like marble, or any kind of necessary things, bricks, etc., with particular signs that are good for the registry, like budget-keeping purposes in the empire. So he would present this at the end to the financial offices, saying that, okay, this was my budget and I spent this much, now I don't have this much, or I have this much leftovers, etc. So we have thousands of such registers from constructions. I am giving you just examples. There are very few examples. I can show you 100 documents from judge records to outgoing document books, document books to edicts, and there's so many classifications of document making. Each has its own format. And there are, yes.
Excuse me, is it correct that when new sultanate comes and that they register the books came from
certain books? For example,
I mean, all the
if you have a document with the signature of Sultan Süleyman, the Sultan changes, you ask for a reissue with the new Sultan's signature. When the new Sultan comes, the budget, like financial offices, did a whole overhaul of whatever is in the treasury.
Including books.
Including books, library books you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes, not always. Because in 17th century, for example, if they have tried to do that, there were sultans who ruled only 2 years, a few months. It would be like, okay, one more. I don't know, like there's not a detailed history of it. But there are cases that we know that inventory count has been done for books as well in the libraries. In fact, about libraries, we have Hatice Aynur here, who is an expert on Makkat, the first library, in fact, responsible for restoration of that space to some degree, because she went and find out several things there. But I am showing you instead a library building, Ahmed III library building, an engraving done by a French artist in 17th century. So what you see here is the bookshelves grouped in 4 blocks. You can enter through the blocks, and there are little cells, wooden cells that store the books, and there are more shelves on the walls, and people are sitting this way. Today we don't have these desks, to my knowledge, in any library remaining from these years. In fact, Ottoman libraries experienced a huge neglect during the Republican period, and most of their movable items in them disappeared. Even during the 19th century, I think it was an ongoing process. As books start being printed, manuscripts fall out of fashion, and it was difficult to take care of them. But this shows like a public library. 17th century was the heyday of building public libraries. And this is the Ragıp Pasha. 18th century, sorry, thank you for correction. 18th century, Ragıp Pasha library. He was a vizier, one-time vizier. He held many posts, and he was one of the iconic poets as a vizier, etc. He changed the rules of poetry in 18th century to some degree with a new style, for example. Here I will start turning slowly to poetry. Almost every judge was a poet or an author in Ottoman Empire. Every high-level officer, a vizier, was an author, either poet or writing risales. Sultans composed poetry without a break, like starting with Murad II in 15th century. We have Sultans' poetry collections. For example, this is a wonderful copy which was produced at the end of Süleyman I's reign in 16th century, and his divan, Süleyman the Magnificent's divan, is one of the largest poetry collections ever produced in the empire. So he produced so many poems. I forgot the number, 5,000 plus, I think, ghazals, only ghazals. It's an amazing number. A sultan who had fought, who had so many campaigns, was able to have time to write and record poetry, which was a craft, as you will see, was amazing task. And until very late, I don't know about the 19th century sultans are not very much renowned poets, but Selim III, for example, was a musician and a poet, an amazing one. I can show you many such examples of sultans, viziers, judges, professors, who were also poets, with their poetry collections published in manuscript collections. This one is from Istanbul University Library, this copy. Here, for example, you see, this is from Metropolitan Museum of Art, a folio, unfortunately, from a copy of a divan by the Sultan of Ottoman poets. He was called Melik Shuara, Sultan al-Shuara, Baki, a 16th century poet. And in this image, book painting, he is shown, Baki is shown with Ebu Suud, one of the Sheikhul Islam, the supreme religious leader of the empire. Ebu Suud is an iconic character as well. There are so many iconic characters in the Ottoman Empire. And they are holding, they are convening around books, as you see. They are sharing books, reading books and there are important people. We can't name them now. And then there are servants, but these are looking like palace servants, educated, young, male servants. And there's also a protecting more military class youth is in the depiction. Yes, as I said, most of the leading Ottoman poets of the empire were linked to the palace either through bureaucratic offices or through military or educational institutions. They were the ultimate convergence ground that connected documentary and scholarly writing or intellectual writing. Their complex educational and professional backgrounds made Ottoman literature unique in world literary traditions. Signatures of the Sultans that symbolized the power of the state were slowly bleeding into the signs of poetry through a distinct imagery that Ottoman poets inherited from Persian and Arabic and further developed. At this point, I would like to invite you to a poem by one Necati Bey. I in fact quote from his Tura poem at the beginning of my talk. This is an early poem in the repertory of Ottoman poetry, but a very famous one. And this is from late 15th century. Allegedly, this poem introduced Necati Bey, then a local poet and a scholar in Kastamonu, to the intellectual center of the empire in the late 15th century, and helped him rise to the position of a prince's advisor and teacher. The translation I will share with you is by Walter Andrews, my mentor and colleague at the University of Washington. So in Seattle we have two Ottomanists, Ottoman literature specialists in one university, which is amazing for American state standards, right, Ilham? Yeah. Walter Andrews is responsible for much innovative research on the Ottoman Empire and its literature. His retelling of Ottoman poems are wonderful, as you will see, and creates great interest in the US for Ottoman poetry to some degree. I will first read you the poem in its original language and then the translation of it. Here the original is in gray letters and the English is in red. Let me try my best to recite an Ottoman poem. It's not that easy. Okay, this goes tam ta tam tam tam tam ta tam tam ta ta tam tam ta ta tam tam ta ta tam. Okay, ta ta. Çıkalı göklere ahum şerevi döne döne, yandı kandilisi pührün ciğeri döne döne. Ayağı 20 basar zülfine berdar olanın, zevkü şevkiyle verir canı seri döne döne. Şam'ı zülfünle gönül mısrı harap oldu diyu, sana ilettik ebuter haberi döne döne. Sen toprak surasın, karşına ben boynum eğem, ine zülfün, koça sen siyim beri döne döne. Kabe olmasa kapun ay ile gün, leylü nehar, eylemezlerdi tavaf ol güzeli döne döne. Sen olasan diyu yer yer asılıp ayneler, gelene gidene eyler nazar döne döne. Ey Necati, yaraşır mutribi bezme uşşak, rak surup okuya bu şiiri teri döne döne. It weaves many ideas of beauty and divine together in a well-executed meter scheme with the repeated rhyme element döne döne döne. You need to read it here in this poem. Otherwise it is döne döne, which means spiraling or turning. It talks about a lot of things. Sparks in the sigh of a lover, this sigh, that reach up to the skies to light up the sun or the moon. The lover's heart hanging on the hair of the beloved, the dancing beloved and his hair embracing his silver breast, empty mirrors yearning to reflect the beauty of the beloved. As a matter of fact, these all signify the trials of lovers as described in a particular ideology of love in the Ottoman Empire and in pre-modern Islamic literatures. To conclude this fleeting look at the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish language, I would like to focus on only 3 lines of this poem, just to give you an idea about the pre-modern Anatolian language that Mustafa Ali described as the sweetening of a coarse tongue and how it reaches to wider horizons than the documentary texts reflected in the hands of poets, who, let me remind you, also were writers of those dry documents, which are still beautiful to look at. I focus on only 3 lines, otherwise it may take hours. These are the first, middle, and last lines of the poem. I think especially located as such by the poet. The whole poem has a composition. The last one also carries the signature of the poet. Necati, it's a nickname which was called Mahlas. A poet's nickname was a different persona. So that poet, right, singing the poem, suddenly turns around and calls his poetic persona. Oh Necati, hey Necati. Şu sazcı bu taze şiiri söyleyip dans etsin. Meclisin sazcısı diyor yani. These are the first, middle, and last lines. The last one, okay. The first line sets the poem into motion. In fact, the poet says that the sparks in my sigh, yani ahımdaki kıvılcımlar bu gökyüzünü harekete geçiriyor. The sparks in my sigh puts into motion all the spheres, he says. Those sparks lit up the sun and the moon. There are two candles of the sky. One is the sun, the other one is the moon. And they are in a constant chase, like they turn around, okay? And so this is important. But what gives this sigh, what caused this sigh is important. And he says those sparks also burns the liver of the heavens, of the celestial spheres. In fact, it is his own liver burning in love, right? And this burning, it turns into kebab, ciğer kebab, right? It turns into kebab. They use the word kebab for it. And then it burns and burns, and there is this smoke piling up in the body of the poet. Poet goes straight, and it is like, oh. There is this black smoke rising to the skies. Here I couldn't find a better image, but this is a very popular image in the coffee houses, etc., all around Anatolia. It is a depiction of an Arabic poem. Ah minel aşk ve halatihi, ahraka kalbi bi hararatihi. And it goes on. But ah minel aşk, this is the ah, elif, and the he. And as you see, elif, hey du çeşm, the two-eyed he letter is crying. And his tears flooding the world. And it is bursting into flames, burning the skies. And you can see moon, and this is most probably a 19th century depiction. It looks all the signs, and it's a folk depiction. But this story is in the first line, right? And it's repeated by other poets. Here the last couplet is depicted from an 18th century, again a public çarşı resmi kind of a thing. Still you see a youth with a little junk, a poetry book, leaning against a tree, sitting next to a learned man, most probably entertaining the learning man, or there is a training thing. But there are the singers, and there is a dancer. Unfortunately, the hair is not visible here, as the poem depicts a hair as well, like turning and whirling around, etc. So, what starts the liver of a lover? What burns it? Have you ever fallen in love?
Ciğerim yandı.
Evet, ciğerim
Hiç zaman
niçin?
kalbi yağmaz diye.
Hiç ciğerim.
Yani şimdi
Because the
idrak
liver
ediyoruz.
was a very important organ that controlled the emotions. The bile, yes, it was very important. That's true, you're right. But I am asking more like why, how it
Now
works,
you-
love. How did love work in the Ottoman time? Because there is a scheme of it. Like it started with a gaze, a glance, and I will do you one of my favorite Junda tricks. Yeah, okay, Ottoman summer school tricks. Because the gaze of the beloved this is the eye of the beloved. It is, in fact, let's put here another eye. Okay. And this is a blade, in fact, a side glance. Because the beautiful person you see and fall in love looks at you and turns away. Always. They never come to you. Like, they just turn away. And this turning away, the edge of their eye, that glance, slashes your liver. So it is slashed to be cooked. Okay, like I'm with the fire of this beautiful image, which stays with you from that moment on. This is how it's explained in the poems. This slash, it is a dagger. Glance is gamze. Gamze is a, blade kind of a thing. And it changes meaning in modern Turkish. It's a dimple, but at that time it's a side glance, okay? And this slashing slides liver, the image makes you feel really hot. You're burning with this image constantly with you, but you can't reach that beloved. Because as he turns away, the beloved turns away, his hair very long, in hoops, like a butcher shop. They use the image butcher shop for the hair of the beloved. Why? Because the hearts at this point that hung on the hoops. So the lover is a dilber, which means in Persian heart carrier. Lover's hair. They go as they hop the hearts of the beloved lovers, hop on the edge of its hair. This is an image, a bloody image in a sense, because this is like a war zone. Love is a war zone, dagger is there, right? But the only thing that gives life is this dot-like lips, which keeps the water of life. But in order to reach there, you need to pass through the daggers. You need to pass through the scimitar, the sideburns, scimitar. There are the pits, the dimple, where Joseph may be put by his brother. Yes, Gamze, like this Gamze is different from this Gamze. Okay, and then, so this was very dangerous, and the beloved's cheek was like sun. What happens if you look at the sun? So you get blinded. But what is it that you're blinded to? It is the whole world. But once you see this face, what remains is this image in your mind, and you're blinded to anything else. So this love is a unifying love. Suddenly the whole world turns into a night with full moon in the middle. The only thing that you can, in fact, you can look at the moon. So it stays like that. And this is really an image. If you look at the sun, then suddenly you're like blinded, but there's this yellow dot, just like the moon in the dark kind of a thing. So full moon, mehtab, is very important as a sign of the beloved. So this guy starts his poem from the point after he fell in love, after he was slashed and his liver started burning, because each ghazal, each literary poem shared this image, this love, falling in love story. And he says, like, I am the reason, he says, that the sun is bright, moon is bright, because it is my love, the sparks of my sigh, my complaint of this love, because it is not a willing complaint, I explained to you, it burns and you can't do anything, but you need to, and release the smoke. But it is a complaint in the end, and this complaint sets the celestial spheres into motion. Okay, everything starts rolling. And by the mid-couplet, we see something else is revolving, spiraling, which is the poet asks to the beloved, you, rise, dance, spinning. I bow my head, I submit. And yet, it's your twisting curl that embraces your silver breast. Yes, I submit, he says. But the black hair embraces you, not me, as this fair, he says. So he's external to this turning thing. But silver and hair, which is black, brings to mind again the moon and the sun, the night and the day, manifesting itself, themselves, on the body of the beloved, in the action of the dance. So this is what we all submit in this universe, right? The evolving spheres and the wonders of the day and night. And this literature, constantly obsessed with this day and night and their changes, always, from the history books to poetry to stories, etc., day and night. Day is the sun, which blinds, moon is the more cold, reflected light, which you can look. It reminds of Plato's cavern analogy. In a sense, you can see the shadows, like you can look at the moon, but it is just a reflection of a sun that would kill you. So it brings to mind the God's two aspects, Jamal and Jalal, beauty and harshness. Jalal. Fury, yes, furor of God versus its beauty, His beauty. So this beloved is just like God, both beautiful and furious, like a war machine, slashing, throwing you around, hooking your heart up like in pieces. And there are so many images created around this story, beautifully. It is a puzzle. When you look at Ottoman lyric poems, they are little puzzles to surprise you. It is more like Sudoku, because there are only this many images in different combinations. You need to put the right combination, find the key word to understand it. But it is more fun than Sudoku, but more difficult to do. There is a payment for everything, like I. And at the end, suddenly the poem changes direction, and Necati is called by the poet singing the text. He calls his own persona. Hey Necati, at the royal party it would be pleasing for the musician to dance turning, reciting this fresh new verse. So the last couplet refers back to the poem itself, which started with turning of the universe. Now he says, let the musician turn and sing your poem, because they were singing these poems. We have so many stories, we don't know all exactly, but in the public places, marketplaces, people like jugglers, for example, some account talks about how jugglers juggle and sing a poem, etc., love poem. So it is very difficult to conceptualize. But here, this is important, why the musician should sing this poem. Because musicians generally play, and then why the musician would sing and dance at the same time? Like, too much expected from a musician. Sorry, I can only hardly playing this thing, and you want me to sing and dance as well? Like, this is more like a street player with all the, etc. There is one thing, mutrib, like the musician in this word, is in fact a mystic leader, it signifies. Zuhal, one of the brightest stars, Venus, is a player, is a mitri, and you find your way through following it, etc. Kind of a thing. Like it is one of the most visible lead in the sky. So Mutrib is so Necati is in fact self-promoting a bit. He says, hey, whoever leads whoever should sing this poem now, because it shows the way to the skies, to lit up the skies and starts them turning, and if you sing this motion will continue constantly, because this is really a very empowering ghazal. It is not a whining ghazal, because they're whining ghazal. Oh my dying, etc. But this is like you start up dancing. I am ready, like for this torture, because watching this beauty dancing is a torture. You can't reach that beauty because this having itself really devious devices. So at the end, the poem resembles this party to the moment of Cepheus, with the leader Mutrib, like with the leader controlling this moment. But in this poem, according to this poem, the leader is the poet, the lover, who lifts up the sky, who would lead this majlis, this gathering, with his song, with his poem, in a sense. So that's all from me now, and I will try to answer if you have any questions.